welcome to One-on-One and episode 3. Today, I have somebody very special with me who I've had not only the chance to get to know personally, but also work with. Gursharan is a clinician, a researcher, a mental health advocate, and she pursues clinical and counselling psychology here in Toronto. And she's also the head of something called the Roshni Project, which is a multi-phase research and knowledge mobilization project based on young South Asian women experiencing mood disorders, which is something I loved collaborating with her on. And so today's conversation is going to take a totally different turn from what we've been talking about so far. And we're going to be talking about how the pandemic is reshaping how we're approaching mental health or conversations about mental health. So any thoughts before we start, Gursharan?
Just that I think it's so great. Thank you for inviting me on, first of all, to chat with you. We always have the best conversations, so I'm really excited for today. Also a little bit nervous because this is my first ever Instagram live thing. I'm not good with technology and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. I haven't really done a lot of public speaking recently, so this is a bit of a different type of public speaking, I guess. I'm a bit nervous about that. But yeah, this has been a really interesting time just for me kind of personally. I'm a new mum. My daughter, her name is Arya. She's almost 11 months, just days away from being 11 months. And, you know, raising her during a pandemic and then, you know, the global revolution that's kind of happening as well has really, I think, I mean, it's changed a lot of the way that I thought I would be parenting and the conversations that I thought I would be having with friends and family and colleagues and the types of things I'm reading. And I don't know, my own mental health, I think, has been a bit all over the place because of what's happening in the kind of bigger picture. So it's very different to what I thought this year would be. Yeah. And I'm not alone in that as well. Yeah.
Which I think is a great place to start on what we wanted to talk about. And I think maybe because we started with talking about Arya,
okay,
beautiful Arya. In that sense, it's something when we were talking about mental health especially for new moms in this period of time, and that kind of support system. So, what do you think are the key elements that either we're missing right now or are things that we should be working on, especially for people who are going into this for the first time in terms of parenting?
Yeah. I think where we are today here in Canada, and I know for England as well, because that's where I'm from and my family are all still there, that, you know, we're allowed to now kind of integrate with other people. So I think today where we are with the pandemic is very different to where we were when it first started. You know, the kind of phrase, the slogan I have in my mind when I think of this time has been, you know, we lost our village. I was 6 months postpartum, 6-7 months postpartum, and had just started to kind of get back on my feet. I was finding time for myself. You know, my in-laws were coming over to help out with Arya. You know, I felt comfortable leaving her with somebody else apart from my husband. And all of a sudden this pandemic kind of hits and we're stuck at home. So we lost our support system, our in-person support system. I mean, it was great, you know, we can FaceTime and kind of continue to talk to people, but, you know, I think for new parents, that was a huge loss. Myself and other mums as well that I've kind of been connecting with during this time is almost grief around what this year was going to be. So being on kind of maternity leave and all the hopes and dreams that you have for that time. So the isolation piece, I think, has significantly impacted people's mental health. And then, I mean, there's so many layers to this, right? I just have one small child, but families that have older children, you know, the kids were suddenly at home. So the pressure of that, partners were working from home. There would, I think for women, you know, we kind of tend to carry a lot of the emotional kind of labor and general labor in the home. So having everyone at home, you know, increases that significantly. So I think there were a number of factors there that were impacting new mums for sure. But you know, it's not just new mums that were being impacted. I know you and I have talked a lot about this, right, in our previous conversation. But people that are living by themselves and disconnected, or you know, in different countries to their families. So you know, did you want to share some of your thoughts and experiences about that? I don't want to
Um,
speak for you. Yeah.
no, for sure. Like, I think coming now to a point where people are coming out of isolation, and
Yeah.
for me, I still haven't. I should be in the next couple of days, and that's giving me a lot of panic. But I think coming, like, how to deal with a pandemic on your own is so different from how to deal with a pandemic when you're around people, especially
Mm-hmm.
family, because you have a priority level of when you're coming out of isolation, like who to meet. Like, you know, like if my parents were in the same, not even the same city, in the same country, my first priority would be, oh, like I need to be with them, you
Yeah.
know, like once things open up, or with closer family, or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But when you're on your own, you don't really have a priority system of, oh, who do I meet first and how do I manage it? Because friends have their own like families and people around, or partners and
Yeah.
siblings, and you know, like, so you're just trying to handle it, you know, and see, oh, who do I meet first? How many people do I meet? And
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're alone, you're craving that, but you're also so nervous about it. Like you're craving that company, you're craving um, any social contact, to be honest, just to see another person. Like in fact,
Yeah.
last night at about, I think, 1:30 in the morning, one of my friends showed up downstairs in her car, just drove past. She just joined Nurali.
Okay.
And she just called me saying, come to your balcony and look down. And
Yeah.
it was the most unexpected thing, but it made my night, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's somebody that I know
Yeah.
out there, you know, who drove by and just to say hi, you know.
Yeah.
It's moments like these, I think, that have, you know, really built that kind of support system over this period of time.
Yeah.
When you're alone, like, you know, dealing with that kind of everyday mental health journey, like
Yeah.
through this point on your own versus with family. And I know each one comes with its benefits and each one comes with its
Mm-hmm.
challenges, right? Like for me, I
Absolutely.
have the time and space to reflect on everything because I'm on my own. There's nobody like
Yeah.
coming in the way of me trying to like figure out my life and fix it and do any of that. Whereas, but at the same time, you miss somebody around who can help you deal with your moment to moment, like, you know, panic or paranoia or sudden breakdowns or things like that. Versus I know people who are with family who are feeling like it's hard to deal
Yeah.
with a mental health journey because you're so focused on, oh, like what does everybody need, or whether, or like, and that's in a lot of senses even stigma because a lot of people don't have conversations within their family about mental health.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And then not having the supports that they may, you know,
Mm-hmm.
usually have, right? Um, yeah. I think people that have I just, oh gosh, we don't even know the level of suffering that's occurring right now, right? Or that has occurred over the last few months. Um, but I know one thing that I've kind of been reading about and hearing is this the constant worry about the future, worry about going out, worrying about, you know, when will we kind of return to this new normal, whatever that is. You know, what will that new normal kind of look like? Kind of really worrying, really anxious about that, and you know, that uncertainty, I think, really fuels that worry and that anxiety.
And as a person, I was interested to know, as a person who has dealt with this, like on a more like person to person patient level, and also
Yeah.
through like the Roshni Project, um, like what do you think in the sense of like moving forward now, like for somebody in the mental health sector, like, you know, on dealing with people either coming out of this or still stuck in that isolation loop, like, you know, like how do you think the approach will change from now on?
I know that a number of services kind of pivoted to, oh, I see the hearts on the side. See, easily distracted. Um, I know that a number of services pivoted to online um, kind of therapy and online support, which is really good. And I know that there was a lot of funding that went into telephone support. I'm obviously not practicing at the moment because I'm on maternity leave, but you know, I kind of wonder, you know, how will we get back to this face to face contact, and if we're going to be doing that with kind of wearing masks, I you know, kind of wonder how that's really going to work. I think of the even with the online kind of approaches at the moment that I'm kind of seeing, how are people reading people's body language? Like, for example, I can only see your face and I know you can only see my face, but I'm like, my hands are all over the place. Like, I speak with my hands, right? um and my kind of my just my general kind of body language, how that shifts, you know, when I'm talking about certain things. So I'm kind of curious how these things will kind of play out. But I definitely think there's going to be more of an online presence as we move forward. The feedback that I'm hearing from colleagues is that it's working. It's better than nothing. And I know that my colleagues and clients kind of went through an adjustment period where it felt a bit kind of odd and clunky, but over time have adapted, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another kind of key word that I think of in terms of, you know, our mental health during this time is how well can we adapt to the changes that are occurring, and that's all like our mind, right? The flexibility, the you know, not being so kind of rigid, the kind of not feeling kind of so stuck, and being able to shift and shape as things kind of come up. And yeah, I think the other thing that I've seen that I've been really just proud about, of like so many people that I'm kind of following, or you know, on social media, or in my own personal life, how they've actually used this time to look after themselves a bit more than they were previously, which has been really good to see. You know, whether it's they're eating better, they're reflecting more, they may be exercising, you know, just slowing down is another one. I think we are the grind, you know. I think this period of time has proven that term is so outdated and we don't need to ascribe to that anymore. And if, you know, I see it, I see how that's kind of helping people's mental health. So I think there's the systems that might change, like the way that supports are provided, but I do see individuals changing too. And then you know, like I kind of think of I can't separate any of this conversation from what's happening with, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, addressing anti-Black racism across all cultures. And, you know, how I see people really just becoming more conscious of their thinking, of their language, you know, that's all kind of being able to reflect on oneself. Not everybody, but you know, there's definitely more than there were 6 months ago. Yeah.
Which is a huge achievement, I think.
Huge,
Huge,
huge.
huge.
You know, change is slow. You know, I think there's some things that will change quickly, but to change people's ways of thinking, their belief systems, you know, that's going to take a bit of time, and
Mm-hmm.
really kind of that constant learning, and chipping away at that learning. It's a forever thing. You know, I think those are all things that are connected to one's mental health as well, right? You know, if I'm not doing well, I'm not going to have the capacity to go and kind of do that work that I need to do. So yeah, there's been good things I've seen as well. Yeah.
Mhm. But now that we're talking about, like, we touched upon the entire idea of moving things virtually, or how things have been virtual,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's telephone over like video calls, or
Yeah.
support in that sense, from mental health advocates for
Yeah.
people who are going through anything. Um, last week during my conversation with Massey, we had a very interesting um, note, which was we were talking about how, given that we've moved so many things virtual and so many of our conversations virtual, we've tend to like develop like a facade that we've put forward to people of how like
Yes.
we look on video calls,
Oh my
or the kind of
gosh.
things that we say and the kind of things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward in terms of like, like in terms of therapy, or even like approaching somebody for help, or giving somebody help, it's like what we were talking about, body language, and um, like how do, like, I think a huge part of therapy, even like for me when I went through it, was
Mm-hmm.
that hard part, like being able to be totally transparent and honest with this other person, right?
Yeah.
And how they pick up on the things that you don't say, not just the things that you say. Um, like, but now moving things virtually, when we're doing this
Mm.
entire, oh, we have to be this way, or we're, like, you can't see the entire person, you can't
Yeah.
do any of that.
Yeah.
How do you think, like, we could positively navigate through that, like both
Yeah.
from both sides of the situation? Like, how does
Yeah.
someone provide support, and how does
Yeah.
someone actually be just themselves, like, on a screen?
Mm-hmm. I think my sister's still listening in, but we were talking about this the other day because she's also very active on social media. And how do we separate out what's happening and how we are kind of, how we present ourselves? Social media is a whole other thing. But how do we remain and kind of stay authentic within that kind of world as well, but separate out us as like an individual, right? She says I am. She's still here. Um, and I think that's a really important thing that kind of moving forward, I think we're going to have to do, right? So, separating out who we are, who we kind of present to the world, but then how do we kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, you use the word transparent. I think it's authentic.
Mm-hmm.
How do we remain authentic, and allow ourselves that space? I think therapy is very different to, having a chat with, your parents on FaceTime, or, this type of conversation that we're having. Therapy is a space, it's a protected space, for you to be you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whether you choose to do your hair, whether you choose to just, stay in your pajamas, if you want to cry, like those are all things that I think, you know, should remain that way when we think about online therapy, and teletherapy. But I think the same thing, even in person, actually, it takes time to build that relationship with your therapist. And I think this is an added piece to that relationship, right? So it's almost like me as a client, then there's a therapist, and then there's this piece of technology that's kind of helping us communicate, right? That we have to learn to kind of integrate that into that relationship almost. This morning, for example, one of the best things for me during this period of isolation has been, I don't have to think about doing my hair. I don't have to think about wearing makeup. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. Like, it can mismatch. Like, it doesn't matter. But all of a sudden this morning, I woke up and I thought, oh shit, like, I need to do my hair and I need to put my face on, and what am I going to wear? All of these kind of questions and concerns started to come up as soon as I started to look at myself through, how are other people going to perceive me, right? And I had to have a conversation with myself. I was like, okay, what is manageable right now? Okay, I found a dress to wear. I put a bit of face on, and my hair is my hair, right? But I think it's just going to it will take time. It will just take time to kind of to get there. I think, we have to be compassionate with ourselves, because this is a change, in the way that we are communicating with each other, and especially, you know, in therapy where it's a really, it's a different type of relationship. But being compassionate, giving yourself time, right? Adjusting to that, adapting to that, I think, and being open-minded. You know, if there is somebody here that's thinking about reaching out for help right now, try not to allow, you know, the fact that it has to happen over, you know, like a teletherapy, prevent you from reaching out. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually
I
gonna
don't know if
be
that answers your question. I kind of feel like
no,
I
it
kind of
does. It
rambled,
does.
but it's you
Um,
know, I think it's a valid thing that we have to think about, and maybe it's another issue that we have to talk about. You know,
mhm.
there's the whole kind of, you know, reach out for help if you need support conversation. You know, there's finding the right therapist, but then is this another barrier that people are going to, you know, experience, and how do we support people in that? I think has to become part of the conversation, and it is. We're talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think we touched upon something very briefly that maybe I think we should put out there for anybody who is going, like, through this period of time. I think a lot of us have come face to face with things we've not thought about or talked about, or whether in our communities or our family or with ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of people are coming out of this with more awareness of their mental health, even if not like a coping strategy to how to deal with it. But I think a lot of people are recognizing various layers to what they're going through.
Yeah.
So for somebody who is coming out of this for the first time, you know, and doesn't know where to begin, like, you know, this journey, what is your um, what are your thoughts? Like, what's your take on, like, you know, what they should feel at this point, or what they should do at this point?
Yeah. I think if anybody is experiencing, you know, any kind of mental health issue, first port of call is always like your family doctor, right? And they can kind of help you navigate the services in your immediate area. But there's also a service called Connects Ontario. So this is, obviously we're in Ontario, and it's a telephone line, but they can help you find the right services for you in your neighborhood. So you know, that those are the kind of things that I would kind of recommend, as a starting point. I think the other thing that I've personally found helpful, and I know people in my community here locally have as well, but there's been, you know, so much great content coming through Instagram from local organizations, local leaders in the mental health field. Really good accounts that I think people can follow for not just information but tips and strategies that, you know, we all need to help us kind of get through this time. But those that are kind of really suffering and need that more formal support, definitely family doctor, places like Connects Ontario. For young people, there's the Kids Helpline. So they're doing telephone therapy. I know schools have kind of finished now, but that I think would be another place for young people to kind of go. But I know here in Ontario, in the last couple of weeks, services have started to resume, albeit in a slightly different way to pre-pandemic. But things seem to be kind of starting up again in terms of face-to-face supports as well. So it seems like that will be available soon. Yeah.
In terms of, we've talked a lot about the idea of like anxiety or uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in our conversation prior to this, we were talking about the existential crisis that a lot of people
Oh,
have been having,
yeah.
whether it's about like meaning of life or like mortality, which we were talking about last week,
Yeah.
and how it's affected, how like it's kind of like been a reminder of mortality for us is something we were talking about last week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or so I think in a period like this, you know, like where it's so uncertain, it's so, you don't know. And how do you, like, I feel like the first place you would probably turn to for support is like your community, whether it's, you know, your friends or your family or the people around you all the time. But a lot of people, I feel, are finding it hard to broach the subject of mental health with their like near and dear ones. Whether it's, again, I don't want to assume why, but I feel like from the ones that the stories that I know, it's either a question of judgment or it's a question of stigma, or, you know, or just fear of how they're going to be perceived, like being weak or vulnerable, or, you know, not good at dealing with life or whatever it is. So like, what would be your I wouldn't even say tips, but like what how do you navigate that kind of situation when you need to talk to somebody you're close about something you're going through? Like, how do you begin to approach this?
I know. I think not everybody has that type of relationship with people that they're close to, and I think we're going through this really difficult time. Everybody is going through this difficult time. Just in addition to the long list of things, you know, you've just stated, I think that there's also not fear, but not wanting to burden other people too, knowing that everyone's going through something right now. So how do we find a way forward? I, as you also kind of speaking, use the term uncertainty, and I think one of the things that I've learned through this time is learning how to tolerate that uncertainty. And again, that kind of feeding into our ability to adapt to the current situation. There are some great psychologists out there who've actually released workbooks for free on this topic. So tolerating uncertainty and that, how that kind of links to anxiety and worry. So I think for those that can't turn to their friends and family, know that there is support elsewhere. So like I said, online, you just have to Google this stuff right now. And there's just so much great content out there for free, PDFs that you can download to help you kind of work through these things. But, you know, those kind of resources are for people that maybe are able to do that work by themselves. So recognizing that that's going to be part of the population. But there will also be those that need that more formal support. And maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a coach, maybe it is reaching out to, you know, some of these organizations on social media, because they also recognize that we're in this unprecedented time and are responding, right, where they maybe wouldn't ordinarily. So places like Sorch Mental Health, which are based here in Brampton, PCHS, so the Punjabi Community Health Service. I know these are very South Asian specific services. That's the space that I work in at the moment. You know, they are able to provide that support over the phone and as we've kind of talked, right, like online. So yeah, I think that's I don't know if that answers your question. I just saw that Shreya joined. That's distracted me.
Which is what put a smile on my face automatically.
Hi, Shreya.
On that like note of seeing her join, and I feel like we've talked about like the space that you're working in, which is more on the South Asian side of things. I think this is a good time to, like, you know, not a plug, but just talk about the Roshni Project.
What would you like to say about the Roshni Project?
Oh my gosh. I think the Roshni Project is just so many different things to me. Like, you know, maybe if you talk about, like, just so that there are a lot of people here who won't know what the Roshni Project is, talk about like the origins of it, and then like we can talk about our experience together in phase 2.
Okay. So the Roshni Project is I think Medley already said this, it's a multi-phase research project that looks at the mental health of young South Asian women. 3 phases to this project. The first phase was an arts-based focus group. We worked with young women over a period of time to really understand their mental health experiences, the issues that they've kind of faced, barriers to seeking help, once they kind of got into help, you know, what was that support like for them? So just very really kind of getting this kind of overview of their experiences of mental health and their needs. We then continued to work with the same young women that had taken part in the project, that first phase, and we developed a series of resources, which is where Methali, we had the pleasure of working with Methali on this second phase, who is an absolute superstar filmmaker, by the way. And Methali worked with the Roshni tribe, as we all became known, yeah. And developed a series of 4 short films on kind of but kind of targeting different communities that these young women came into contact with on their recovery journey. So there's a film for family members, one for faith leaders, one for mental health service providers, and another for educators. Along with the films, we have a series of tip sheets, but there's tons of information, and you can access the films on our website, which is www.theroshniproject.com. We got some funding actually to move into phase 3. So phase 3 will involve developing a structured psychosocial intervention for young South Asian women experiencing mood disorders. So that's the piece that we'll be picking up when I get back to work in August,
which is extremely exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Roshni Project, like, I think for all of us who went through it together, I think for us in itself was a mental health journey of going, like, that's why I think we became a tribe, you know, because I think we spoke about so much and we became so much to each other that it's like, you know, it's that kind of community that we were talking about before, like that kind of support system that you have. I think working on that was, I think, one of the best things I've ever done, but also like the most challenging things I've ever done is, you know, to take somebody's like real life experience and story, especially when it comes to mental health, which is so multifaceted, right? In like so many ways you can look at it, so many ways you can interpret it, and so bringing it onto a screen was like, I think, really challenging, but I think it turned out well. I think so.
It was incredible. It was incredible, and I know people might think I'm biased because, you know, I'm part of the project, but you know, this is the feedback that we had from other young South Asian women, and even older South Asian women reached out to us, you know, after the film festival, which is where the films were screened initially, letting us know that this was great. They wish they had this this type of support, you know, growing up here in the GTA. So you were phenomenal. You were so phenomenal. Really, really talented filmmaker. I think that project, we all transformed. It really impacted all of us. And that work continues to impact communities. You know, I know that there are colleagues that have used the films and the tip sheets and held workshops and conversations with people that they work with, or young women that they're kind of working with as well. So that's been really great, because we want this work to kind of continue to impact people's lives, not just sit on a website, right? So that's been really great to hear.
Which I think is a very important thing to bring up, like, you know, now that we're coming out of isolation, but more like trying to deal with this pandemic and the new normal, like we keep talking about, which honestly I don't know what that is, but but I feel like it's a term that I
don't think anyone does.
I
don't think anyone does.
If I don't say it, like, you know, the new normal, I feel like I'm gonna have FOMO, like, you know.
But what is that, right? That term, we keep hearing it and it's kind of thrown about. I mean, I do it myself. I refer to that. I almost feel like it's an anchor for me in many ways. It helps ground me. Like, okay, there will be a normal at some point, right? But I come back to that being able to tolerate the uncertainty. How do we kind of get to that point? How can we be nimble and adapt to things as they kind of change? Because everybody's new normal will be different, depending on your work situation, your family situation. We talked a bit about this and we haven't touched on it today, but if we're living with vulnerable people, I shared, happy to share again, my husband suffers from a chronic illness, and we've had to, our approach to integrating people in has been very cautious, and we probably took longer than other people that we know in our circle, but we've had to do that. We've had to take extra precaution because of him. So that him returning to work, him, us as a family getting back to the new normal will be different. Yeah.
I think, oh, thank you, Shreya. I appreciate that, and I appreciate our connection. Also, Shreya also works in the mental health sector for jack.org. So I think she's also a great person who would be able to give insight into this entire thing that we're talking about. Speaking of which, if anybody has any thoughts, especially now that we're talking about this idea of moving into the new normal and what we're looking for, I think for people in the mental health sector, I think for them it would also be important for them to know what are the questions that people are having now coming out of this, or thoughts or reflections that they've had, or how they want to see the space change, or how they want to see the conversation change, especially now that people are talking about this, not just in our South Asian community, but also in many other communities, and how to make it more accessible, or less judgment and less stigma, or so if anybody has any thoughts at any point, please do feel free to share. This is a safe and open space for that, and we would appreciate any thoughts. But as we're talking about a new normal, I think your new normal now coming out of this with, I think you're ending your maternity leave sometime soon.
Oh, I'm so sad. I melt down every time I think about it, so I'm just like, oh.
No. What do you for your new normal? I feel given that you said that you have a partner who has a chronic illness, or you have a baby in the house.
Oh my gosh.
What are your thoughts, fears, positives? What
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think going back to, I think, where you started with one of your questions and we kind of veered off somewhere else, or a comment that you made around, this throwing us into an existential crisis. I think, this has brought a lot of my fears to the forefront, right, around death. And, I know people in our community, thankfully, there's nobody in my immediate family or friends that has been severely affected by COVID-19, as in that they've had it and had to be hospitalized and so on. But, I do know people in the extended community who have lost family members. And, I think listening to the news, that's all you're really hearing, right, is the numbers and the people that have passed. And, it brought a lot of that to the forefront for us. I think that's my worst fear. If I was to have, there's a spectrum of fear almost, right? That's the worst fear. And then what would that mean? We then had to have kind of conversations about who would look after Arya if we both catch COVID and we both pass away. I never thought I would be having that conversation in her first year, right? But this is the new normal. I'm worried about putting her into daycare and what that's going to be like for her, in terms of socializing, in terms of getting COVID. I know that the information, what we're hearing, about children, like small children anyway, is that their symptoms aren't as bad as kind of adults and older adults. But still, I don't want my kid to become unwell, right? I feel like I spend a lot of my time protecting her from, for example, the flu season, right? Protecting her from that. And I want to continue doing that. So, I think our biggest challenge right now is figuring out childcare for when I go back to work. And then for myself, what is work going to look like? I've been out on maternity leave for a year. The world has changed. And, I live in Brampton, but I work downtown. I don't know when I'll go to my office because, people are still kind of working from home. I have a lot of anxiety right now. That's, a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety. I just, it's
we have a question.
Okay.
Massey says, what effect might this period of isolation and lack of touch or community have on young children or infants growing up at this time?
I think there is worry that, and I'm worried too. This is, one of the reasons, like sending Arya to daycare, people there will be wearing masks and the kids won't be allowed to kind of interact and as much as they maybe would have, and kind of so freely. I think that's my fear, because on the other hand, I know that young children are really resilient, and they adapt way better than we as adults do, right? Majority of children, I should say. So I worry, but I'm not sure that that's kind of rooted in any kind of facts, if that makes sense. I think the thing that I'm personally most concerned about is, they can, like my child, her generation will grow up knowing people to be kind of wearing masks, right? So Arya, from middle of March, we've been isolating, so the three of us, and then I think it was around beginning of June, we integrated my father-in-law first into our bubble. And she was so excited that there was another person. She seemed really satisfied with just me and Mandeep on a day-to-day basis. But all of a sudden there was this other person that she was interacting with and kind of bonding with. When we go outside of our home, like onto our porch, and you see people walking by, she's like, she wants to interact with people. And I wondered, is that because is that her personality, or is that a kind of a result of being in isolation and not having the people around her that she would have kind of had ordinarily? I don't know. I don't know if there's any evidence around this or any research that's kind of been done, but I think me moving forward is I'm going to have to separate out my worry and like the actual facts around this. I think another example, we had to have somebody come in to do some work during this period. We had an issue with an appliance, and that person was obviously kind of wearing a mask and so on. And there was a point where Arya saw this person just as we were kind of exiting, and was just staring at this person in a way that I'd not seen her kind of stare, but was wearing a mask and so on. So, I don't know. I would love to hear from people if they have older children that are able to express, because she's 11 months. That's my only experience. But yeah, there's something, and I don't know. Because she's not able to share that.
I think on that subject, like as you were speaking, what I was thinking of is how before all this happened, we were talking about, like, not we isn't just we, but globally, we were talking about like kids and like kids are growing up in this time with all the technology that's around, right? A lot of people, like, whether it's a question of mobility or whether it's a question of, they're so focused on their screens that a lot of people don't know how to have in-person conversations with like somebody near them, because especially kids growing up, right, like they're so used to their devices and all of that. And I know it's a conversation I've had with a lot of different people over a period of time. I wonder how this is going to now change communication for kids again. Like, you know, are they going to want more of it, or are they now going to want less of it because now they're not used to it at all? Like, you know, or like there's a fear aspect for them also, maybe, like, you know, because maybe they see their families panicking about it, or maybe they don't understand, or maybe they do.
I think
I
for
some are,
sorry.
no. It's I think it's like some kids are super perceptive and, like, you know, so how do we really know what's going on?
I think these, I was actually talking to, I don't know if you know the mum boss of 3, Tina, the mum boss. No? Okay, so she has a really great account for if there are any parents, and just generally, like, she's a cool person to follow on Instagram. I was chatting to her about this, and in relation to children that are of school age and how they've been impacted, right? So come March, they were pulled from school, didn't go back, you know, then had to be homeschooled, which was a very different experience to what they used to. I think older children, from what I was speaking to her about, and then what I've kind of heard in other conversations too with mums of older kids, teenagers, are able to kind of grasp it a little bit better. But those that, you know, between like 4 to kind of 13-ish, really struggling with kind of their own mental health, right? And understanding what is going on with the pandemic and how this is changing their life. You know, why am I not allowed to play with my friends? The weather is nice outside. Why can't I kind of go outside? Why am I not doing my usual activities like swimming and so on? You know, and then for kind of older kids, the piece around graduation, right? I know so many young people, I say kids, but all the way through to kind of university, right? People have missed out on these major milestones because of what's going on with the pandemic. And I kind of, the word grief, there's a loss around that. That's kind of what I've been picking up from conversations. You know, loss of these moments that people had kind of been working towards, and kind of celebrating those milestones. So again, this word adaptability, right? So how are people then adapting to that? I see people find different ways of celebrating those milestones. I think it's definitely a conversation that parents kind of need to be having with their young children about what's going on, and kind of checking in with them, because if this is impacting us as adults, it's definitely impacting them as kids. And obviously doing that in a kid-friendly way. Again, there are resources available online to help parents guide that conversation. But I think, you know, we have to take care of that generation too. I almost feel like it's probably going to be harder to get support for kids for mental health issues than it will be for adults, right? Because we have that ability to kind of go out and kind of find things. I know parents can obviously do that for their children too, but there's almost like an added layer of worry there, I feel, with parents.
Mm-hmm. Now, like, as we approach like the end of like this amazing conversation,
I survived. Oh my God.
We have another question. What are your thoughts on the effect of the pandemic on fathers?
Oh my gosh, this is great. Yeah, good question. Again, the pendulum, this is one of those questions where it could kind of go either way, right? Spending too much time with family, I know for some has been a really difficult time. But most of the people in my circle and what I'm kind of hearing in our own personal experience as a family is that it's allowed fathers to spend that time with their children that they probably wouldn't have previously. So again, I always use my personal experience where I can. So Mandeep's been working from home since middle of March. And you know, he'll come, this is our office space that I'm in right now, you know, he'll be down here during his work hours, but he's, you know, there's no commute time, so he's with us early in the morning for breakfast. You know, he'll pop up for lunch, so Arya gets to kind of see him throughout the day, and then, you know, he's done work and he's home. You know, I think he's way more present, and I'm hearing this from other parents too. There's a layer of stress, I think, that's been removed by working from home. I don't think that's necessarily specific to fathers, but that's just what I'm kind of seeing from him, and him kind of being able to work from home. So I think there's two sides to the coin. I think for some, there's definitely been a strengthening of that bond, because they're, you know, they're seeing each other a lot more frequently. And they're at home, I think, to see what happens throughout the day as well. Whereas maybe fathers, especially in our case, you know, Mandeep wouldn't have seen a lot of the things that I do, or, you know, the kind of activities and things that I do with Arya. So he's been a lot more involved, which I think has definitely strengthened their bond. But like I said, this comes with that kind of other end of the kind of spectrum, where I know that for some people it's been a challenging time, especially for those that have got, you know, fathers with older children. Yeah, it's put a strain on some relationships for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like a last like few thoughts on the idea of like, now that isolation is like, you know, we're coming out of it, you're coming out of maternity leave, so there's like
Mm-hmm.
it's our new normal, like, you know, you coming out of maternity leave and me trying to break isolation. I think, like, what would you say to, like, for individuals, like, not like necessarily mental health advocates or somebody in that
Yeah.
like sector, but individuals, on how to approach their own mental health, like the good stuff that they should take from this, like what they've learned from this experience, and what to leave behind, and also the idea of now coming out of this, the because like I can tell you personally, like breaking isolation
Mm-hmm.
coming with a lot of like anxiety and stress for me, like, you know, and I can tell that, and I've been questioned a lot as to like, why are you not doing it, and why are you not outside, and like, why, like, you know, and some people have been very supportive about it, like it's coming out of concern, but for some it's come out of a lot of judgment for me, saying that no, but like, what's the point of you being so strict, and why aren't you at this party, and like blah blah blah, you know. How do we now, coming out of this, learn how to deal with not only our own mental health, but the mental health of somebody, like, you know, we care about? Like, how do we do that in a positive manner?
That's a big question to answer.
But see, like, you're the one person that I know would be able
That's
to
a
answer the question.
that's such a big question. I think it's a very individual thing, right? It's I mean, it's almost, I just need a second. I'm thinking about myself here, and what I would do, you know, and this is probably what I'm going to do, is almost make a list of things that I have enjoyed and things that have been helpful for me during this time, and things that haven't been. I know that sounds really, might sound kind of odd, but this for me is for each of us as individuals to really reflect on, what has this time meant, what are, you know, what are some of the meaningful things that have happened in this time for us as individuals, and what do we want to take forward. I think this is another part of that new normal conversation that I've been reading about in the news, like, you know, articles and so on, and in conversations as well. there is really this push to not go back to what life was like, because there have been some real benefits to people, you know. Let's use this example, working from home, right? I know so many people whose employers previously had said, you know, oh, you can't work from home, that cannot be accommodated. The pandemic hits and all of a sudden so many people everyone's working from home, right? All of a sudden, you know, there's this capacity and there's the technology and the money, and it all flows, right? Because it has to at this point. So now that we know that, and that's part of our normal, you know, that's just one example, right, of something that I know for some people has been really beneficial from this time. So then how do we advocate for that moving forward? So kind of going back, what are some of the things that have been meaningful? What are some of the things that have been helpful in this time? And what are some of the lessons that we do want to take forward with us? But then I think, you know, this advocacy piece, I think if we want to maintain some of those things, other things are going to have to change, right? So whether it's having that conversation with your partner, right? Okay, I really, in this 3-4 months when we were all home, I was able to find time for me to exercise, for example. How do we moving forward create that time for me when you go back to work and I go back to work, right? Or advocating with, you know, our employers, right? If during this time we were able to make some of these accommodations and actually they really worked and were really good for our mental health, how can we, you know, continue to make some of those accommodations moving forward? Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think this is really...
It does. I think it does.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think this is going to be, I think we need to acknowledge that this is an unprecedented time for all of us, not only for all of us going through this, but also for everybody in the mental health sector, you know, trying to deal with it and try to adapt to, you know, creating a support system. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And on that note, like, I need to be mindful of like the amazing person who's been there for me, Gursharan, who's been here for me for so long. So thank you for not only being here today, but being part of my support system. And I'm so grateful that we could have this conversation. And to everybody listening, to everybody out there, anybody out there, to your family, friends, whoever, like, I feel you're not alone in this. Like, all of us are going through this together. So if there's any point, like, let's be there for each other. Let's, you know, grow from each other. And yeah, like, I'm grateful for all of you. I'm grateful for you, Gursharan. I'm grateful for everybody who's on this chat today, whether I know you or not. And yeah, like, I'm looking forward to more conversations about this, more conversations about everything else in the coming weeks on our next episodes. And until then, good vibes to all of you. And yeah, sending love and light to all of you. And stay blessed, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. See ya.